Welcome to another episode of Pinsky Law Presents. On today's episode, we're going to discuss firefighter physical exams. And I ask the question, do you have a policy? So today's information can be found in the Fire Department Law and Management Resource Manual, pages 245 to 286. This is a monster topic. We're not going to cover everything that's in this book, but we're going to give you the highlights. For the full information, see the book. So let's talk about why do you need a policy. You know, fire departments today typically just send their members to, or employees, to an exam group. And we rely on the exam group just to say, do the exam and let me know whether they can be an interior firefighter or a scene sport or a chief or fire police or whatever. The problem is the fire departments and the districts don't have a physical exam policy, and you need one. We're going to learn why you need one and the problems of not having one. You see, without a written standard, the physician groups are setting the standards for the department. And you got to understand that these policies as to who can be a firefighter and who can perform any operational duty on the fire ground, that's what's called a non-delegable duty. In other words, it means that the fire department can't ignore the requirement to come up with its own policy and can't simply delegate that responsibility to anyone else, for example, a physician group. And that's what is exactly happening today, that fire departments are just sending their members off and saying to the physician group, hey, you examine them and you let us know what they can do. So you're violating this non-delegable duty. You can't delegate it to someone else. You have to have your own physical policy, and you have to create the standards which very clearly say how healthy you have to be and what lab results you have to have and what job performance requirements you have to be able to meet in order to perform any duty on the fire ground. And that's what we're going to talk about in this short episode of Pinsky Law Presents. So let's first be clear. Physicians, they're not policymakers. They are simply your agent, but they're not your lawyer, they're your agent. And they should not be making up their own standards. But we allow them to do that. Every time you send your members off and ask them to certify what they can and can't do on the fire ground, you're allowing them to make up the standard. And the problem is there really is no standard, because physician John Doe may be there on a Monday, but physician Jane Doe is there on a Tuesday. And they may not be performing to any single standard. And if they are, who knows what it is? And more than that, what does the doctor necessarily know about what's required to be a structural firefighter or an operator or a chief or fire police? You know, imagine that the physician is on the stand because you've been sued, let's say, for discrimination. And that's normally what happens when you reject somebody and you say you can't be a firefighter or something else on the fire ground. They sue you for discrimination and based on a disability. And the doctor would then be on the stand. He'd be asked a question. Well, doctor, can I see the written physical standard? Doctor would say, I don't have one. I just know. Well, doctor, does everyone in your office evaluate the firefighters by a written standard? Doctor would say, no, they'll just kind of know. So effectively, the result's going to be there is no written standard. There's no standard at all. If it's not in writing, it's not a standard. You have got to have a written standard that you hand to the physicians. Then when they're on the stand, they will say, here it is. This is how we operate. Now, most physicians will tell you, oh yeah, but we do 1582 physicals. Well, NFPA 1582 is a great standard. It's a good starting point. But I don't really believe that you're all getting 1582 physicals. And every time I ask somebody, oh, what standard? They say, oh, 1582. And I say, are you fully compliant with 1582? They say, absolutely, we're fully compliant. Well, I don't think so. If you read 1582, you're supposed to be getting a colonoscopy at the age, I think, of 40. Are you getting colonoscopies? Because that's a pretty expensive exam. And especially at age 40, the insurance companies aren't paying for them. So if you're not fully complying with 1582, then what standard do you have? Moreover, if the doctor's creating the standard, does it really relate to the essential job functions? Because that's what a court is going to ask of the jury to determine whether your standard relates to essential job functions. Does it provide that the firefighter has to perform essential skills and have essential attributes? Or are they unrelated? Again, don't leave that to your doctor. Let's make it up ourselves and put it in writing. Do you allow your members to go to their own doctors? Frankly, I think this is the worst thing you can do, unless they bring a written standard with them. But if their own doctors are evaluating them, the question has got to be, what standard is anyone using? You know, if you want to lose a lawsuit, just do two things. First, don't have a written standard, and then do whatever the heck you want on any given day. I promise you, you'll lose in court. But if you want to win a lawsuit and not actually discriminate against anybody, you have a written standard and you stick to the standard. So we've got to provide the standard for the medical providers, and that way we can make hard, realistic choices. So what's the solution? Well, as I've been saying, create your own exam policy. You can model it after NFPA 1582, but don't adopt it blindly. NFPA 1582 is a really good starting point, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It gets you a lot of the ways there, but it doesn't get you all the way there. Then once we create this policy, and there's a great sample policy, it's about 20, 30 pages in the Fire Department Law and Management Resource Manual, then you should send your members to a lab. They have the exam, they come back with the exam results, and your physician evaluates the results and compares it with your written standard, not some exam group standard. They act as the lab, but your physician determines whether the members are qualified to fulfill the roles which they want to roll, interior, exterior, fire police, etc. Your physician does that. The lab just serves as a lab. The exam group just does an exam. Stop having them make a determination. Now, if you really feel strongly that they should make a determination, fine. Provide them with the written standard and make sure that they adhere to it. So what's the main components of a policy generally? Well, first, you need to know who can and can't join. Now, NFPA calls a complete bar to joining a Category A exclusion or Category A condition. If you have any of these Category A conditions, for example, you're on blood thinners, such as Coumadin, or you're type 1 diabetic, the NFPA physicians and drafters determined that it's too dangerous, regardless of anything else, it's too dangerous to have certain conditions and be a firefighter. Those are Category A exclusions. And they absolutely stop you from joining. But the way I draft these policies, and the way I believe that the NFPA 1582 intended it, is that this is a joining or hiring policy. It is not a return to work or a every year annual evaluation exclusion. If you develop one of these conditions while you're already hired or already a volunteer, then we're going to call those Category B exclusions. Now, a Category B exclusion, whether you have it when you join or whether it's a Category A exclusion that becomes a Category B because it's on an annual physical, those are prohibitions to serving as a member or an employee unless your doctor will certify that there's some reason that they can keep serving, that it's not an absolute bar. Give you an example. So assume for a moment I am an asthmatic, but I'm really controlled and it really only gets bad at certain times and I take my medications. That might be a reason where the doctor says, you know what? You can be an interior firefighter. It's a Category B exclusion, but I'm going to sign off that you can keep doing the job. Your policy has to have those Category A and Category B conditions. Now, you also need a job performance requirement. What's an example of a JPR? Well, here's one. An interior firefighter shall be capable of wearing 60 pounds of gear, climbing a 24-foot ladder to a roof, carrying 15-pound saw, and then performing 20 minutes of aggressive work on the roof at a pitch of 15 and 2. That gives a doctor a very clear picture of the stress on your body, and it also answers Do you need one arm? Do you need two legs? Do you need to have a certain strength? Do I need to have a certain ability to climb and walk and stand and have balance? All those things in these JPRs give a doctor an objective standard as to whether I can do something. So this is not easy. Drafting this policy, I drafted one. The one I drafted for the book took over a year and a half. And we met with physicians and we consulted policies and standards. It took a while. You should use both an attorney and a physician to draft the policy, and keep always one thing in mind, one golden rule. What you put in here has to relate to the job. So you can have a standard for interior firefighters. Maybe that's more strenuous than it would be for an operator or fire police. But the standards have to relate to the job. So I would say gain a year and a half of your life back. Start with the Fire Department Law and Management Resource Manual, and then have a physician tailor it to your own needs. In short, this policy is going to save you. If it's well written, if it's carefully tailored to the needs and requirements of a fire department, it will answer the questions you're going to be asked. Who can join your department? Who can return to work? Can someone with a disability join? What disabilities can they have that allow them to join? What if someone's on workers' compensation? Can they join? Can they keep being a member? What about a pregnant woman? Can she serve as a firefighter, and how long? What if someone becomes injured on the job? What do I do with them? Can they still serve in some capacity on the fire ground? What about old people? What about overweight individuals or unhealthy individuals? Can they serve? If you have a good, well-written, well-thought-out policy, it will answer all of these questions. And if you stick to the policy, you will not lose a claim that you discriminated against individuals. Well, that's it for another episode of Pinsky Law Presents. I hope this helped, and if you need any more assistance, please consult the Fire Department Law and Management Resource Manual.